So I don't think we've mentioned whether you're using on-premise or cloud software over there at Triangle.
So I am using on-prem and a private cloud.
Oh.
So sort of a hybrid.
Hybrid,
Yeah. And well, there's a reason for it.
Just to clarify, right, Business Central on premise.
Yes.
Meaning
Hosted.
you're hosting it yourself.
Yeah.
And you have full control over the environment, and everything.
Yes.
It happens to be on a private cloud, yeah.
Yes. So the reason for that is, well, there's a lot of reasons for it. So one of the things I'd mentioned is I came into a company that we really were coming out of a system that was not a true ERP system. And if you want to know more about that, go to my original podcast and you can hear all kinds of great stuff about it. But the idea was the scalability of it. I like the idea of going into a infrastructure as a service type of an environment where I can scale it as I need it. And that's what I do love about infrastructure as a service is it's scalable. The reason I didn't use the Azure model at the time was I used a previous iteration of it with SaaS Plaza with Microsoft. Wasn't exactly my favorite flavor of it. And the reason for that was it didn't allow for as much customization as I was going to need. Now, that being said, I really don't want to heavily customize a very good system. You know, Nav/BC is a very good system. It's using a lot of industry standard practices. The problem is you're coming into, you know, as I mentioned, you know, at the time, 90-something-year-old company, at the time, I think 93-year-old.
Mhm.
We've been doing it this way. So trying to just basically shoehorn everything that they've been doing for 93 years into this very rigid format is just not going to work. I mean, and that's a recipe for failure, is to just completely change everything that everybody's doing and just stop dead. Now this is the new way we're going to do it. And I think that's why a lot of sometimes ERP implementations fail. You're not considering that change management. So going into a hosted environment seemed very rigid to me, whereas I can move into, if I were to have an on-premise license, I can customize it. And while I may not have agreed with all the customizations, I knew that they were stopgap solutions to assist us in getting everybody into the system. Okay, now that I've got you acclimated into Business Central and Nav, and you're understanding it. Okay, so now let's start pulling that out, and let's start to get us into more of the business standard way of doing things. And 5 years into this implementation, I was telling Ken earlier today, that we're going to be looking at doing another upgrade, and in that upgrade, we're going to be looking at potentially going with more of a hosted solution or going with more what I would call standard out of the box Business Central, because we've come a long way. If you look at it like this, it's like, you showed a caveman fire, then all of a sudden you're showing them a light bulb. It's just, that's a big jump. I mean, Business Central was fire to us. That was something very scary and new, and it's a great tool and it lights things up, but yeah, that's scary to look at. And I think now we're at the point where it's like, okay, I want LED lights everywhere. And I think that's what this latest evolution for us is. So I see the value of both on-prem and the hosted model. I see both. I love cloud in general. Like I said, we're using a private cloud, which is just us hosting with another company. It's not actually an on-premise server. It's our license, but hosted someplace else. But down the road, could I see us getting into a SaaS model? Of course, I see that as a natural evolution of what we're doing. I think that's what a goal of ours should be, is to start operating as a with the standard form of Nav or Business Central. And one of the funny things I would tell people is when we were doing the implementation and they would fight me really hard on it, why doesn't the system do this? And I would look at them and go, Microsoft's a pretty big company. They've been around for a couple of days now. If they're looking at their ERP system and they're not doing it, should we be doing it?
Yeah.
Like are we really smarter than, and it's sort of a humbling moment that you have to bring people to that. And it's like, we don't know as much as we think we know. Just because we did it this way and we quote unquote worked, doesn't mean it's right.
Correct. Yeah.
So, but I think also if you want to make an ERP implementation fail, I think, change everybody's world the minute you put something like this in. So I think you have to do it as a staged approach. And I had told everybody when we first brought Business Central in that I want it to be sort of a non-event when we do phase one. I want to replicate, what we're doing in our current system. I want to definitely get rid of a lot of the bad things. But I don't want to change your whole world. I need you to get used to these new screens. I need you to understand it. And I need you to understand the system.
Right.
Phase two is when we're going to actually start to realize the benefit of this system. And I think, Ken, you've probably you probably hear from me a lot less than you hear from my end users now. Like, I think they're calling you up with more questions and they're calling you up with more modifications and
Yeah,
requests of the system.
yeah, not even necessarily modifications, but they were crawling and now they're walking and they want to run.
Right.
So it's like, hey, I want to start running now. How do I do this? And I would use the example of job. Let's go back to jobs, which we were talking about, right? When we initially deployed it, the job structure, meaning the number of tasks that were there, or the planning lines that were created, were relatively simple.
Right.
Let's just do a bulk entry for the total amount of engineering. Well, now it's like, how can we do a better job of tracking the actuals versus the budget? We want to break that down with, electrical versus mechanical engineering and budget those separately. How do we do that? Well, we build more tasks.
Right.
And we budget now at that level and we start tracking that level of information. So it's not always customization. It's, hey, how can we change our setup, or what can we do to improve the use of this module?
And goes back to the point of the value of the data. So now you start looking at that data and you started saying, well, wait a minute now. Something that I didn't think was valuable, now it's missing things. I need more data out of it. So now you've actually just increased the value of what I'm able to capture. Now they're asking you for, okay, can we, how do I capture this? When I think customizations, it's not so much changing the way it's doing things. It's, can I add this field in because I want to be able to get this data out of there now, and I want to start tracking this. One of the things I just spoke to Simeon about today was I need to add a date stamp or a timestamp. And right now I'm only getting date stamps on certain transactions. I need timestamps with it as well. So, I mean, these are things that it's like, okay, we have it. We didn't even know we needed it. Now we're using it. It's like, wait a minute, this is great. I need more.
Taking it to that next level.
And that's what I love. And the other part that I love is, and what I was going to is that you're hearing from, the users, which is really what is the most important to me, is because I want to be the caretaker of the system. And I mentioned that as, my job is I'm the caretaker of the information, caretaker of the system. And that's really where my function is. But the users need to own it. The fact that they're calling you up, the fact that they're trying to evolve it and get more data out of it, that's really where the win comes in for me, is that they're owning this. They feel a ownership of the system. And that's what's going to move this whole thing forward, is them owning it. Because if it's an IT solution, I'm going to be very rigid about it, and it's going to be very logical.
Yeah.
And it's an illogical world.
Curious to know, excuse me, you said you're a lover of cloud, and as the caretaker of the system, would eventually moving to a SaaS-based model scare you from like a security standpoint, or no? Because I guess you don't have as much control.
You don't have as much control, but I think there's, things that you can put in place. Well, first off, I look at it like this. I mean, here, I do as much as I can to prevent it. And, if someone's really gonna like do an organized attack, I mean, they can get into, every one of them has been hacked, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Sony. They've been hacked. They have more money than I do. But they also have people that are sitting there 24/7, and there's teams of people watching it. So there's a more concerted effort to get into them. We, have put a lot of money into our security. So, do I think that I'm any more protected by not being? No, I'm not under that delusion that if I put it, I mean, that's like saying that my money's safer in a mattress, in a shoebox under my mattress than it is in a bank. Well, okay, I guess, but it's not a realistic way of looking at it. I mean, You know, I think that's the difference is, to me, that's keeping it on premises, that's shoebox in the under the mattress. So, you know, I mean, I'm hoping that most of the people that are listening to this have a bank account.
I would imagine so.
Then there we go. So it's a very similar
Our
concept.
target market's got it.
Yeah.
Most of them,
Yeah.
Hopefully,
And that's how I view that's how I view SaaS versus, you know, on-prem.
right.
But, you know, once again, you have to crawl before you walk. And I think it's just introducing that into our environment more slowly and getting us into a more standard operating, you know, environment and getting us out of our bad habits. And, you know, I love that our leadership has a very defined plan of using Business Central in its standard format. How do, you know, I hear this comment all the time, and you know, it makes me smile when I hear this, is what does out of the box Business Central work like? I'm glad you asked that. Let's get there. And I think that's really where we want to be as a company. And I think, you know, it's an evolution to get there. So I think that starting off as a on-prem is definitely, you know, that crawling stage. I think, you know, running marathons is when we get into a fully hosted SaaS model.